So, one December a few years ago, I was on my way to the White Sands Buddhist Center for one of the one-day English retreats there. And I turned on the radio, and it was set on NPR. I just didn't feel like listening to the news. You know, I was going to guide meditation all day, kind of wanted to be in a peaceful state of mind. And so I was surfing around the radio stations, and like I said, it was December, and I happened to land on a FM station that plays nothing but Christmas songs all December long. And they happened to be playing Bruce Springsteen's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So I stayed there. I liked Springsteen, but that really wasn't the point. I felt the need to listen to Christmas music. And so I listened to that station all the way to White Sands. And they played Gene Autry's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and the Waitress's Christmas Wrapping from the 80s, and a bunch of stuff that I'd never heard before, and a lot of old favorites. And, you know, Michelle and I were talking about this on our way here. We were in Fernandina Beach for a few days, and so we were listening to one of her Spotify Christmas channels on the way here. And, you know, there's just something about hearing these songs that you grew up with and that have been a part of this season that just feels right. Every year, at least one person will come up to me knowing that I'm a Buddhist and that I don't identify as Christian and say, "So what do you do for Christmas?" And I'll say, "Well, I do Christmas." You know, my family, I grew up in a Christian family, and Christmas was a part of the household growing up, and it's kind of a part of the culture that we're in. And I think that a lot of us, even if we've converted to something else along the way or whatever, there's something about this season that resonates with us, and I think that there's a good reason for that. When we look at what we think of as Christmas traditions, a lot of them, as you probably know, originated with Germanic and Norse paganism and things like that. And when the December 25th date was set, it's more than likely that that date was chosen because it coincided with popular midwinter Roman festivals. And so most cultures have some point in the year that's associated with the idea of renewal, redemption, a date that commemorates kind of bringing the light into the darkness of winter. So things like the birth of Jesus, the reconstruction of the temple central to Judaism, the birth of Muhammad, the Buddha's awakening, all those are opportunities to kind of think about this bringing of light into the darkness. So at Stetson University, where I'm a chaplain, one of the oldest traditions is the Yule log lighting, actually. And so this was my second winter there as a chaplain, and we just realized last year there were people from the community who come to Stetson every year for the Yule log lighting because it's kind of a neat event, and so it sort of becomes their unofficial start to the holiday season. We do it early in December. And so this fellow walked up to I was standing there with the other chaplains, and this guy walked up and he said, 35. 35 what? This is my 35th Yule log lighting. So we started asking, well, how long has this been going on? You know, and actually it started in 1938 was their first Yule log lighting. So this year was the 70th anniversary of the Yule log lighting. So we made kind of a big deal out of it. And what the chaplains and the other chaplains and I decided we wanted to do was really showcase the students. And so we invited students from the Muslim Students Association and the Native American Students Organization and Asia Pacific American Coalition and Baptist Collegiate Fellowship and Hillel and some of those to come together and said, you know, do something that has something to do with your tradition and the idea of bringing light to the world. And it was beautiful. All of these students got up and talked about that concept, which are integral to each of these religions. So it makes a lot of sense that regardless of what your religious identity is, that this season resonates with you in some way. I started thinking about Christmas music and why that seemed particularly meaningful to me. And it occurred to me that a lot of the songs revolve around certain shared themes that appear in a lot of religions as important. So something like joy to the world, that's a pretty obvious one. It's about the redemption by means of love. There's a kind of central phrase. He rules the world with truth and grace. In other words, forgiveness and supportiveness. We're loved, and feeling that love, heaven and nature sing. It kind of reminds me of this Zen idea that when you're enlightened, the trees and rocks are enlightened. In other words, when we recognize the extent to which we're connected to everything, everything becomes more loving. Other songs, maybe not so grand, but the themes are still there. That song by the Waitresses that I remember, that I mentioned, is the ballad of a young woman who's exhausted by the usual holiday stress, and it ends when she finds true love while shopping for cranberry sauce at a convenience store. And Santa Claus is coming to town. So there are saints and bodhisattvas, but it's hard to find a better example of altruistic, selfless kindness than a jolly man who labors all year in a harsh, dark, cold environment to make gifts and then spends a day tirelessly delivering them all. But if you want to look at finer art, you can look at something like Bach's Christmas Oratorio, which begins with the chorus that translates something like, celebrate, rejoice, rise up and praise these days. Glorify what the highest has done today. Abandon despair, banish laments, sound forth full of delight and happiness. So it's not just the Christmas music, I think, that's appealing. One of the Michelle and I were talking about this weekend too. One of the best examples of Western literature as it appears in Christmas is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And the encounter between Scrooge and Marley, I think, really sums up what Christmas means to me on kind of a personal level as a spiritual teaching. And so when Marley's ghost appears to Scrooge wrapped in chains to tell him that he's going to be visited during the night by 3 phantoms and why. And he says something really beautiful. He says, I wear the chains I forged in life. So he's weighed down by the burden of those things that he should have done and didn't, or the things that he did do that he shouldn't have. And he goes on to explain that. He says it's required of everyone that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit does not go forth in life, it's condemned to do so after death. It's doomed to wander through the world and witness what it can't share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness. In other words, we have this opportunity to live this life and create happiness around us. And if we don't do that, then the effects of that outlive us. Some real Buddhist ideas in there, the benefit and obligations of kindness, the effects of karma. And Christmas reminds us also that there are others less fortunate in the world, and that it's our duty to share our good fortune with them. So this time of year, I go to the prison once a week, and I don't get to go there on Christmas and New Year this year because the chapel is closed on Christmas and New Year, which happen to fall on Tuesdays, which are the days I go. Yeah, so it's kind of a shame, but we try to do what we can leading up to that and leading away from that, because I know that some of the inmates in my prison group are identify as Jewish, and so they want kosher meals, or they're Muslim, so they want halal food. So if you're on a religious diet, then their Christmas dinner is going to consist of beans, cabbage, sardines, peanut butter, and jelly. That's Christmas dinner. So it always, if you look around, there's always people who really could benefit from your kindness. And Dickens saw that when after he visited some tin mines in Cornwall, and he saw children working in appalling conditions. And then later he visited a charitable school set up to help educate destitute children in London. And he wanted to do something to raise awareness of their plight that they were in. And so he started out writing a pamphlet that was going to appeal to people to help them. And then he realized that this would have a lot more impact if he did it as a Christmas story. And so you can see that when the second spirit appears to Scrooge. And as he's about to leave, Scrooge notices something protruding from beneath the hem of his robe. And he points at this and he says, what is that? And the spirit pulls aside his robe and reveals two children, wretched-looking children, kneeling at his feet. And Dickens said, they were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, prostrate in their humility. A stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. And Scrooge startles back seeing this, and he says, are they yours? And the ghost says, they are man's. This boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree, but most of all beware the boy, ignorance, for on his brow is written doom. Ignorance and want, delusion and desire. Does that, if you've been listening to me talk, that should sound familiar to you. Because the Buddha called these things the roots of suffering, the cause of the cycle that leads us to come back to living and dying, and sharing our wealth with those in need is what makes us good people, what helps us transcend that cycle. So I don't think you can call yourself Christian or Buddhist or whatever, unless you call yourself that if you want, but if we don't give our time and attention to those who need it, those labels don't mean very much. So somebody at White Sands sent me a link to a Dharma talk by Ajahn Brahm, and Ajahn Brahm was a very funny guy. He's a British guy who ordained in a Thai order. He's the abbot of a Thai temple in Australia. So if you're not confused already. But at any rate, when he was living in the forest monastery outside of Chiang Mai, Thailand, with a bunch of other Western monks, and they started missing Christmas. They were like getting homesick in December. And so they went to Ajahn Chah, who had founded the monastery there, and said, hey, can we do something to celebrate Christmas? And Ajahn Chah, being a forest monk in Thailand, said, what's Christmas? And so they explained it to him and said, well, it's a holiday and it's kind of about giving. It's about being generous and loving one another and being compassionate and giving to one another. And Ajahn Chah said, oh yeah, that sounds very good. You should do that. And so they started celebrating Buddhamas. And so he allowed them to decorate the monastery and stuff like that. And they went around giving gifts to each other and that sort of thing. So, this is supposed to be a happy time. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and all according to the songs. But holidays can bring up a lot of stress, a lot of family issues and cultural issues and things like that. So we can let those issues be stressors, or we can use this as a practice, a way to renew our life, and in the process, like Scrooge, see whatever humbug moments arise as opportunities to live more authentically. So there are plenty of tiny Tims in the world that can cause our compassion to arise. And it's great to support things like Toys for Tots and organizations like that this time of year. But we should also make it a point to have compassion for the Scrooges around us. It's harder to see, but the guy who cuts you off in traffic or cut in front of you in the checkout line at the grocery store is also suffering, just like you. And so when you notice this anger or frustration, if you can identify for a moment with that person and make a little space in your heart for them, then that makes, peace on earth and goodwill to men. That makes that have some meaning. Peace on earth begins by having peace in your heart. And goodwill to men means all beings, really, even the ones that annoy you. So we also need to have goodwill for ourselves. We tend to pressure ourselves this time of year into giving the best gifts, best parties, best dinners, things like that. A family counselor once told me that she saw people a lot of the time who were pushed almost to the breaking point by their need to make every holiday somehow perfect, or at least top last year's. So we should be a little kinder to ourselves. While we're focusing on being how nice it is just to share our time, meal, even a thoughtful gift, we can focus on, we can do that instead of focusing on trying to measure up to some standard of performance. So if you notice you're feeling stressed out, just take a moment to shift your attention, send love to the people around you, and kind of shift your ego out of the way a little bit. So, if you look at kind of universal ways to acknowledge the value of giving in this season, you might think about this jolly fat man who's always smiling, carries a big cloth sack slung over his shoulder, bags full of treats and treasures, fun things for young people, maybe some sweets and things like that. Often surrounded by children because he's always cheerful, always laughing, passing out gifts, even to poor children. And somehow, magically, no matter how many of these treasures he gives away, he never runs out of gifts to give. And you could see that as Santa Claus, or you could see that as the fat little Buddha on the counter at the Chinese restaurant. Because that fat little statue, that's Budai, who's actually a bodhisattva, which means Buddha to be. And so in Mahayana Buddhism, you seek enlightenment for the benefit of others, not just for yourself. And so you keep being reborn. So you stay a Buddha to be until everyone can be enlightened together. And so, basically someone like that becomes kind of like a saint. So Santa Claus, of course, is a saint. St. Nicholas lived in the 3rd century, helped poor people and the indigent, and protected children, and became a patron saint of the poor and the children. Budai became a patron saint of children, the poor, and for some reason, bartenders in restaurants. He was probably a 10th century Chinese monk, as near as we can ground that in history. And so this is why you see him on the counter in Chinese restaurants and stuff like that. He's there for their prosperity. So we have these different figures from different cultures who originated hundreds of years apart, but each reflects these common themes. Each is happy, which in their respective cultures represents joyfulness, being free from need. Each is infinitely charitable and giving. And so each represents a virtue that in their own religious traditions is important. In Buddhism, we have a concept of dana, which means the spiritual virtue of being generous. And in Christianity, there's the virtue of charity, which means essentially the same thing. So Christmas is spread so much throughout the world that it's almost universal. And even though we celebrate Christmas in my family, I usually welcome people happy holidays rather than Merry Christmas. I have a number of Jewish friends and students, and of course a lot of Buddhist friends. And, you just don't know. So happy holidays is a pretty good one. But if somebody wants to wish me well, I don't care what label they put on that. I'm happy to accept their goodwill, whether they wish me a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, Happy Solstice, Happy Yule, happy anything. Wish me happy and I'm happy for it. So thank you for your time.